Dude, I wanted to start off with I was thinking about I was gonna text you before we started because I was like, I saw something, going through all the Orioles content and like we're exclusive on Apple for 3 games. And like that was
Yeah.
the first thing that jumped out at me. And I probably should have messaged you ahead of time so you could think about it. But what's the game plan here? Because I'm the wrong person to ask because I think I'm still in the process of illegally streaming every single sporting event that I watch through like 3 or 4 different sites. I hit the X button. Next thing you know, I'm watching it. But what are we doing here? So, do you have Apple? Do we have YouTube TV? How exactly do we watch the Oriole games?
Yeah, it's an absolute just I don't even know what to put, but the MLB for someone who continuously says we want to grow the game, we want to, have as many people watch as possible. They love making sure not many people can watch because Apple is exclusive. You have to buy the service just to watch the
Right.
games. So yeah, those games I looked at the one, and I think I'm already planning on going to one of them, so I only have to worry about two. But yeah, well, that's one of those things where when it gets there, I'm gonna have to figure it out.
Yeah, it's just like pain in the ass because you have to like plan. I don't like complaining about capitalism because I want everybody to make money. But I wish at this point they would just tell me what it costs for all the games and put it on one network and be done with it.
Exactly. Just give me a flat. Just tell me what to pay. Just tell me what to pay. So I just have to turn to this channel whenever the Oriole game's on. I don't have to go. Wait, is it on Mass and One, Mass and Two? Is it? Are we on national television? Do I have to buy a streaming service? Just one place I can go to, and that's where the Orioles play.
So I've become so cheap about certain things, and this is just one of them. So I'm like always 2 minutes behind, it feels like. So I can't text any of my friends or anybody during the games because of the service that I'm using. But unless it's, I just don't have, I have HBO Max and like that's it. So anyway, I just saw that pop up. I'm like going through all these things, and I'm like, the MLB's gonna have a Friday night doubleheader. Like they went from the Sunday morning crap to now there's gonna be 2 games on Friday nights. Was it just one game on Friday night last year?
Yeah, yeah. And then they thought, oh, if we can have four fan bases have to pay for this service instead of just two, we double our money.
All right, let's get into I the Orioles obviously, what, they're on fire, it's amazing. But talk to me here about some of the tough decisions. I want to push I think the obvious tough decisions for another week or two because it feels like whether it's Jackson or the fourth outfielder, we're still in the process of figuring it out. But what do you
Yeah.
think is the game plan? I wanted to, poke at you on what you think the game plan is with the starting rotation. It feels like it's settled with Wells and Irvin, but
Mhm.
what's the surprise? Is there somebody that we should be looking out for? And then can you also give us a timetable on when you think Bradish and Means are going to return?
Yeah. I think like you said, the starting rotation is kind of, I would say, set at the moment with the final two spots going to Tyler Wells and Cole Irvin. Julio Teheran, who they just got from the Braves free agent, they brought about a week ago. I could see him maybe making a run at the fifth spot solely if they want Irvin or Tyler Wells back in the bullpen if they prefer them there. And Tehran is pitching okay. I could see them leaning that way, but I think at the end of the day, we're going to see Irvin and Wells get that fourth and fifth spot. John Means, I'm going to say he probably is pitching for the Orioles early May. I think they're really just going to let his elbow, oh, they already let it rest and now they're building it back up. But I think they're going to take their time with him. I don't think it's a major concern. I think it was just inflammation about 6 months ago that kind of put him behind the eight ball. Not consider there. I'm not sure on Bradish. They have not updated us much yet. They say he's thrown. I've seen him throw, I think, from 120 feet now on flat land. So the progress is there, but I'm not sure the official timetable yet.
So yeah, we got away from the scare of Tommy John, and it's nothing like
Mhm.
that. But they have not given us. Okay, so yeah, I think the rotation. Oh, it's funny how you like think about baseball, and it's like, man, everybody needs starting pitching, and you go
Yeah.
into the Orioles with the injuries to Means and Bradish. It's like, Well, the one thing we know right now is like our five guys in the rotation.
Yeah.
Everything else, the last bullpen spot or two, that's going to be interesting. We'll tackle more of that next week. I want to see. I just not that it's pointless to talk about, but a lot can happen over the next 2 weeks. So some of those really close
Yeah.
battles we'll see. But it looks like Cole Irvin looks great, and
Mhm.
Tyler Wells. I mean, I don't think people forget, but just to remind everybody, he was the best pitcher going into the All Star break, and then I think it's a combination of getting tired. It was the first time he had pitched that many innings. He
Yeah.
will be the most fascinating guy on what they want to do with him because, I mean, look, he can say all the right things, but he wants to get paid. You get paid a lot more money
Yeah.
when you're a starting pitcher. If you had to make a prediction on what his season's going to end up looking like, even when Bradish and Means come back, what do you think happens to him?
I think even if he's no longer in the rotation when those guys come back, I think he is a major part of this team. And we've even seen him down the stretch last year out of the bullpen, gave the Orioles a lot of meaningful innings in big time situations. So he's just a pitcher that at the end of the day is going to produce for you. Gives up the long ball last year was his big, he gave up a lot of solo home runs, which of
Right.
course pitchers will tell you all the time. They'll take a solo home run that won't hurt them too much. So I'm a huge Tyler Wells guy. I think he's going to have a great season. I think it starts in the rotation, but by the end of it, I could see him being a big seventh inning guy for us.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll dive deeper into the Orioles next week, and yeah, let's continue the preview around baseball. We're in the National League East, where is it a foregone conclusion? The top two, I guess we'll find out. Yeah, as you nod, yes. So we'll go at the bottom first and start with the Nationals. Um, is there any hope for the Nationals? Are they what's
Oh,
the
they're rebuilding.
expectations in Washington?
They are rebuilding. That is for sure. They do have some young guys. They are finally starting to see the benefits of the Juan Soto trade, stuff like that. You got CJ Abrams is a dog at the top of their lineup, starting shortstop. He's a young prospect, was one of the top prospects in baseball before last year when he graduated to become a player. But I really like what they've built. Now that doesn't mean in the sense of like, oh, this team is going to go win 85 games. I think they have a good mix of young up and coming stars with the CJ Abrams, obviously, Dylan Cruz, who was the number 2 pick last year in the draft. I don't think they see him this year, maybe towards the end. But I like what they've done with adding veterans to this younger group. the the pitching rotation, we're gonna say, the pitching that it unfortunately the pitching is a little bit in a worse situation, I'd say, than the hitting. They do have some young guys coming up, Josiah Gray, Mackenzie Gore, both two guys that they've gotten in trades that over the past, rebuild when they kind of blew up that core from the 20, what was that now, 2019 World Series,
2019. Yep.
18. So they've got some young guys that are finally coming up. They made a decent run last year. This team screams like 75 wins to me.
Well, when you say it screams 75 wins, that's a big over because their total's at 66 and a half. I know it's in your
Yeah.
nature to ultimately be positive and see the
Yeah.
light. So if you're saying 75, I mean, that'd be a gigantic, I mean, that's an
Mhm.
easy win in gambling, right? Like if you're looking at
Yeah.
66 and a half wins. So why do you think, maybe the better question is, why do you think the odds are so low? Do you think they end up trading some of their veterans like we've talked about
Yeah.
before? Or why do you think they're so undervalued?
I think it's because of, they're relying on a lot of young guys. They're looking for Josiah Gray to take that next step as a pitcher, for Mackenzie Gore to really solidify him as kind of their ace in the rotation. They need Patrick Corbin to not do what he's done the past 2 years. That's just for him. It's don't have like a 7 ERA anymore.
Is
But
it
look, I was gonna say, real, just looking through their lineup, it's hard to say they have a lot of weak spots. They don't necessarily have a lot of strengths, but at no point do I necessarily look at the lineup and go, okay, that's a 4 person stretch of they're not getting any production. I think there's potential everywhere, especially as the season starts to wind down and they see more prospects coming up if they do get a Dylan Cruz. James Wood, who is another one of their top prospects, is just hitting the cover off the ball right now. He's like he's 6'6", actually just looked it up. He's 6'6". He's just another monster bat. And I kind of like the youngsters here. I think they have something good brewing. Like I said, I don't think it's something where it's like the Orioles 2 years ago who went on an incredible run to the playoffs or almost playoffs, but could see them sitting around 74, 75.
And maybe a team that in September, excuse me, when they're not in the playoff race, but based on what your analysis is of the younger guys, they're not necessarily the team you want to play, right?
Yeah,
As
they're that team at the end that's going to be playing spoiler.
So 2 Orioles on the teams, and then we'll move former Orioles. And then we'll move on. Hunter Harvey projected to be. I see some people saying closer, setup guy. You're laughing. Are you a Hunter Harvey guy or what?
I think it's so funny because it's kind of like Hunter Harvey was almost like Bigfoot for the Orioles for so long. It was
Doesn't
like,
he? Right, he symbolizes like that dreaded. It's hard to put that on him, but where it's like nothing ever went right, and it's like, is Hunter
yeah,
Harvey coming up? Where's Hunter Harvey? He's hurt again. Where's
yep.
Hunter?
You just kept hearing the Orioles have this stud pitcher, Hunter Harvey. He's gonna be the ace. He's gonna be, and then you just never saw him. And then it was a classic MLB situation. He just goes to another team, gets some new coaches, and he's showing, what I wouldn't say what his potential, we thought his potential could be, because people were saying number 2, number 1 starter on a championship caliber team. We thought he could be an ace, but he has turned into a very solid reliever for them. And he's probably, I would say, the main guy if they feel like they want to sell at the deadline, who could get them a nice return.
Oh, maybe he comes back here. What about
Not mind that at all.
Zach Davies not projected to be in the rotation. What the hell happened? Let me read you these stats. 274 ERA in 2020. Through it was only 69 innings. I guess maybe that was
pandemic.
Thank you. Jesus.
Yeah, at first I was sitting there and I was like, I was like, he was a starter that year. I was like, he played that year.
Right. And then he followed it up in 2021, 6-12 with a 5.78 ERA, which made last year or 2022 look fantastic as he knocked it all the way down to a 4.09 ERA. And then last year was just a disaster. I mean, it's 82 innings pitched, a 7.02 ERA, a 1.67 whip. Is he done? I mean, if he can't be in the rotation for the Nationals, do you think he makes I don't know how much Zach Davies research you've done this spring, but is he making the team or is he finished? Because I thought he was on his way.
Yeah, that's another, or like you said, Oriole prospect that was a part of that weird time. He was for Gerardo Parra. That's the trade to the Brewers back in the day.
Where we couldn't get right. Yep.
Yeah. Another one of those just when we were throwing, spaghetti at the wall, seeing what could stick moment in Orioles history. But I think he's going to be someone who is kind of in that long relief role is where I see him. Like you said, fell off a cliff. I don't know. I had high expectations, especially for the way he was pitching before in that 2018 to 2019, or I guess 2020, 2021 part of his career. It looked like he finally put it together and was going to be a decent pitcher, but then it just all unraveled.
It's not there. So the Nationals we'll wrap it up by saying the Nationals hit their over because the top 2 pitchers, Gore and Gray, are better than expected. And then you think CJ Abrams is a potential all-star. Like if you had to tell somebody, hey, make a preseason bet on over for home runs or MVP, long shot, not MVP because it's the Nationals, but all-star or whatever random props you can do. CJ Abrams, is there anybody else that jumps out? And then we'll move on.
Another guy that just Keibert Ruiz, their catcher, another former top prospect that came over. He's someone that I don't want to say he hasn't lived up to the hype because he's still a very young catcher, but he's someone that I could definitely see taking that step and having a year where suddenly people are like, holy crap, Keibert Ruiz is finally putting it together and becoming putting himself in the conversation for top 10 catcher.
Okay, so you're on the record. Nationals, you like the Nationals more than, I mean, that's a really big, um, yeah, they're over under 66.5. So if you think
Yeah.
they're going to be, that's good to know. Let's move on to the Mets. I mean, the Mets were the big, we talked about this. There's a couple teams that will really exceed their win total and a couple teams that will really fall beneath it. The Mets cost people so much money because once you're wrong about a team, and then you're chasing it with the wrong odds, it's a freaking disaster. And the Mets were that last year. They're
Mm-hmm.
projected at 81.5 wins. So now it's like, is that too low for the Mets, or what do you think? And then we'll go through. I mean, you look through their starting lineup, and it's names that most people are going to recognize. What do you
Yeah.
think?
It, they should like it really they every part of their roster points to this team should easily clear 81 wins, but I don't know if they do, which is so weird because of just one, the rotation scares me. Their rotation worries me a lot. uh their guy Kodai Senga is not, he's their number one guy. He's probably not going to pitch in April, and there is a major drop
I was
off.
going to say, is Quintana like, because he's going to get the nod, right, for opening
Mm,
day? He ranks as one of the, I get, where, I mean, he was solid last year, but is he ranking as one of the worst opening day starters in your opinion?
yeah, he's definitely not like if he was the Orioles opening day starter, I would be concerned.
And then,
I would definitely put him in the lower half of opening day starters.
and are you not a big Severino guy?
No, I gotta see more. I was personally terrified that Luis Severino was going to come to the Orioles just because he seems like the perfect Mike Elias, buy low, sell high type player. But after last year, I know he started to put it together a little bit in his final. He had a stretch of I think 3 starts where he was solid, but he just got bullied by offenses last year for the majority of the year, and their entire pitching rotation is pretty much veterans that they're hoping replicate years that have passed. And it's not
Where's
necessarily years that are most recent last year. Some of these guys, like Sean Manaea, Hauser, Tyler McGill, it's like, hey, we would love for you to pitch like you did in 2020, 2019. It's like, I don't know if those guys are still there.
do they think that do they have a guy, a prospect? Like, what do you think their game? Well, then we'll get to the lineup. Like, do they think they can compete with the Phillies and the Braves? Do they have a couple of younger prospects that they're hoping to bring up? What do you think that the mindset is in spring training for them? Because answer that, because when you look at the lineup is full of guys that think that they're going to the playoffs. So it does start with the rotation and just kind of the mindset. It's a new man. Who's the manager?
Oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to look this up now. Why is it blanking as my they just Carlos Mendoza. Yes, there it is.
Anybody
Uh,
besides Buck? I'm probably in the minority, but I am God, I still will never forget the wild card game. Somehow I
yeah,
was in like the middle of Oregon. I'm a contrarian thinker. I'm just going on a rant for a second. Whatever. Just give me a second here. I'm very contrarian and I'm very pro coach, but Popovich and Buck Showalter have to be the smartest guys in the room. They're already
yeah,
smart, but the way and this Victor Wembanyama not having a real point guard, like the Spurs should be in the playoffs, but
yeah.
he's smarter than everybody else. So we have to manage his minutes, just like he started
Mm-hmm.
this load management crap 15
Yep.
years ago. And Buck, for some reason, had to outthink everybody when sometimes, you just like invest in a Fortune 500 company and just like close your eyes for 30 years.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to find the crypto stock that no one else has ever heard of. And Buck is just managing this wild card game where I'm like, dude, Britain can pitch 3 innings. Like you could have put him in the 6th inning if you wanted to. And then, all right, sorry, I forgot where we even were. So, who's the new manager for the Mets? Mendoza.
Yeah, and Carlos Mendoza. He was coach for the Yankees, so stays in town. Wasn't necessarily a splash hire, but I think almost a little bit of it was they've had a lot of these splash hires that that manager that didn't work out. You had the Buck Showalter, the weird thing with Carlos Beltran where he was hired and then he was a part of the Astros situation and he was like fired before he ever even became the coach. So they're just, I think it's something where they almost wanted someone who's under the radar, but they're gonna need to perform this year to make the playoffs because this is as we'll get to them, there are a lot of tough teams in this division that I think are in a better position than the Mets are. And I think the Mets kind of showed their hand last year at the trade deadline. There was the stuff with Max Scherzer about, okay, what does he want to do? He talked with management. Management seemed to be more in the thought process of this isn't a team that competes, speaking about this year, and they're more retooling this year, trying to see what they have. Guys like Pete Alonso are on their final year, so it will be interesting to see if they're close, if they're above 500 at the trade deadline. It becomes, do they go for it? Do they start selling, prospects? Because they do have a decent farm system. Actually, they just acquired Ronald Acuna's brother last offseason, so they're going to hope, I guess, he has a little Acuna magic in him.
I am very bullish. So, man, I didn't realize Jorge Lopez is also on the Mets in the bullpen.
Yeah.
Is that out
Yeah,
they got
Shintaro
Fuji.
Fujinami.
You can argue, is the Mets have the best bullpen with Edwin Diaz as the closer, Adam Ottavino? Is that how you pronounce it?
Adam Ottavino.
I mean, he wasn't
No, they have
great
a
last
very
year.
bullpen.
I actually really like this Mets team because their lineup. Let's go through it. I think they can win games. They win games early, but just by mashing. All of a sudden, it's easier to pitch with a lead. And you just tell me where the hole is here because I really like this lineup. It's projected to go Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, Lindor, Alonso, Starling Marte, our boy DJ Stewart, Francisco Alvarez, who is the top catcher prospect, hasn't quite gotten it rolling yet. We'll see if he does this year. Brett Beatty, that's the one guy at third base I'm not familiar with. And then they have Harrison Bader in the outfield, projected to bat 9th. Yeah. What am I missing here? Because this Mets team.
No. And even Brett Beatty's a former top prospect. I mean, we've seen Francisco Alvarez really started to show his power numbers towards the end of last year. So if he can just get more consistent playing time, I think he was kind of in and out of the lineup at the middle stages of last season. And then once he kind of took over every day, he's got a lot of pop for a little dude. He is a tiny guy behind the plate, but he will hit it 500 feet. And then Brett Beatty, I really like. But like you said, this offense shouldn't have holes. It's going to come down to what does this pitching staff have? Can they win these games? Do they have to win these games 5-4 each night? Because I'm not sure that this pitching staff, starting pitching rotation, can give you these solid, we're going to give you 6 innings each game. There are going to be games where they probably will have to win these shootouts, 9-8.
So the Mets and the Cardinals are pretty much in the same spot. Different pedigrees, different histories. Obviously, the Cardinals have been
very, very same spot.
I lose you. Oh, good. I made a good point, and then you froze on me. When you come back, and that's why we do it live. I'll finish my. I forgot exactly what I was saying, but you'll be back in a second. Oh, there you are.
Hey, I just said that's a perfect example, and I wasn't going to let you get your flowers. Wow.
Dude, I was about to go back to a Buck Showalter rant because I cut myself short. I could really go on a rant for that for a long time. And Popovich not having a starting point guard. That's where I think I would have ended up depending on when you came back. So next time you need a break, just know that the Spurs could win 50 games this year if he just would have signed. If he would have just said, hey, I'll sign competent basketball players Um,
Just to put around Wemby.
and just let him play. Like he doesn't have to play the whole freaking game, but he can just play whatever minutes Carl Anthony Towns is playing or Chet Holmgren. Anyway, so all right, Mets Cardinals. Yeah, I think they're in the same spot. But this Mets team. So one of the things I like to bet on for baseball, basketball, football, professional sports in general is a team that was supposed to be good the year before. They bring back most of their players. Maybe there's a coaching change. Maybe there's the best players gone, but all of a sudden the expectations are like down 50%. And it's like, isn't this like the same team from last year pretty much? And so I look at this Mets team and I'm like, there's a lot of pissed off guys in the lineup that now feel like, hey, we have no chance to win. Max Scherzer doesn't want to be like, what did we need to sell him on? So I think the Mets are the team. I would say the Mets and the Cardinals are teams where if they get off, if that first 2 weeks of the season is solid, I would read into it for them. Where a team like Tampa Bay and the Dodgers, Braves, you almost throw out the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to really tell the story. But a team like the Cardinals and the Mets, it's like, man, if they're 3-11, the entire energy will be sucked out. So I think the Mets very intriguing to me. If you had to if you had, what did I ask you last time? $100? Is that our number? If you had to bet 81.5, are you taking the over there or what are you doing?
This team scares me. Like you said, I would take the over just because this team, it's the odds or the expectations are so much lower. But they're a team that they're going to need to start hot, and then if they do start hot, this team could win 95 games. I think that's what's so frustrating about 81.5 being their win total, because you look at it top to bottom and you're like, this is a really good baseball team. But then you look at what they did last year and you're like, they played like a really bad baseball team, and it doesn't make sense.
Right. Like if you listen to Mets, like just anybody talking about the Mets last year, it was miserable. Like Padres people, they have sunny San Diego. They can just kind of get over things a little bit better. But like the Mets and the Padres last year, it's like, what the hell? You're just losing a ton of money by chasing those teams. So, all right, let's go to the Phillies. Phillies are one of those teams, right, where the trend is don't bet on them in the regular season and don't bet against them in the postseason. However, this is the typical, oh my God, how do we not win the World Series last year? And you look at their team, they're not changing anything. So there's two ways, right? There's two ways to look at it. The one is, all right, Harper's healthy for the whole year. Obviously, this is on paper one of the best teams. So 90.5 wins. Seems like we should go over. They're knocking on the door. Eventually, they'll win the World Series. And to me, the other way of looking at it, and I think this is where I'm leaning, is you guys should have fucking won last. Like you should have beat the Diamondbacks. Whether or not you would beat the Rangers, that's another story. But you should have beat the Diamondbacks. And I don't like the idea of playing all those extra games and then not changing anything. Like, am I wrong here? Do they have the same exact lineup and rotation that they finished the postseason with last year?
Yeah, they pretty much did not add a single player. They made a few minor deals here and there, but no, the Phillies pretty much said we're going to run this back. And I know not everyone in Philly is the happiest about that decision, especially with how last year ended. And it is an interesting decision because, like you said, they didn't get over the hump. It wasn't like, oh, we finally won the World Series. Let's see if we can go do it again. It's like they came up short. They didn't make the World Series. They fell short of their expectations, especially for a team as hot as they were. So to run it back is it's an interesting decision because I'm not sure they don't necessarily have any prospects that it's like, okay, well, they're just waiting for this guy to come up. He's going to be their big addition. It's that most of their guys are, or at least top guys, aren't coming up this year.
So maybe a good question to start with is, and we'll bring it back to the Orioles. Why did they let go of Kimbrel, and who replaces him?
I honestly think that a lot of the whole Craig Kimbrel thing came down to how he performed in the playoffs. And I don't think he wanted to go back there. I think he was just done with the fans and all of that, and they're just waiting to see who steps in. I think Jose Alvarado has been one of their guys for a while. He's someone I've always really enjoyed, but
Yeah, he was tough.
I've seen stuff. I think he will eventually get the nod there, but it's, like we said, it is a majority of the same team. So, you look at it, you look at last year when I was going through, you're sitting there and you remember the playoffs, and I have to almost temper my expectations. I'm like, okay, this team wasn't that playoff team the whole year.
Where are you at with Zach Wheeler, his contract? Um, I feel like all bad things here with the Phillies. Like they're comfortable now. Like, do they have the edge? How good is Zach Wheeler? Would you have paid him relative to like? I mean, is he going to get better? Was that the best he could be last year? From a fantasy standpoint, from a gambling
Yeah.
standpoint, what do you think? What do you think of his season coming up?
I mean, I really like Zach Wheeler. Obviously, Jackson Holiday got two hit, or at least got a double off of him. So I'll use that as just a way to bring up Jackson Holiday. But I think he deserves it. I think he and Aaron Nola are an incredible top two in the rotation. And after that, Ranger Suarez is good. Taiwan Walker's good. You're going to see they have solid pieces still after them. And actually, I would say this is one of the better rotations in the league. Unfortunately, they're in a division with one what I consider to be probably the top rotation in the league in the Braves. So it's, the Phillies, they're in that weird spot where this is a very good team. I don't think they win the division just because I think that's going to be the Braves kind of run away with it. And they're relying on being that 87 win team that just performs well in the playoffs.
And can they afford any injuries? You mentioned their farm system is relatively weak. They also seem like a team where they get an injury or two in that lineup. Can they replace that?
Yeah, I don't think it's I obviously it's going to depend on who. If losing a guy like a Bryce Harper would be catastrophic for them, but there are some guys that they could do just because of the star power. If they lose an Alex Boehm, if they lose a Brandon Marsh, Bryson Stott for a few games here or there for a few stretches, I think they can overcome that because of the guys like Schwarber, Turner, Harper, Castellanos. When they're hot, they can almost carry teams themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not necessarily worried about, okay, can an injury derail this team? Now, an injury to Zach Wheeler or Aaron Nola is a different, that's a whole different beast because you don't have the star power from the lineup that can necessarily, obviously can't
I
pitch
don't
for it.
I don't like this spot for the Phillies at all. I think that's the team I would sell right now. I would bet against their win total at 90.5. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
think
I don't think they touch 90.
I just think, especially the way you described the Nationals, that you were optimistic about them, and they're not maybe somebody that's just going to roll over here at the end of the year. I like the Mets team better. I just have a hard time with a team in baseball and the NBA. That postseason, those extra games, it's not like football where I think the extra couple of games mean a huge difference at all.
Yeah.
I think the emotional downfall, like for the Niners, is a real thing, the emotional
Yeah.
aspect of it. But the amount of innings that the Phillies bullpen pitched, um, and just, I don't know. I don't like the spot for the Phillies at all. I would say the first month of the season, I mean, they've proven it time and again that if they get into the playoffs, like it would be a
Yeah.
different beast. But they should have won last year. I think they matched up really well with the Rangers, and they
That
should
was
have
their
beat the Diamondbacks. So
No, I
I
think
would,
this team they're a team that I don't think they're going to get up for regular season games. I think they have just so many playoff performers. They have so many guys in their lineup that once they're in the playoffs, that's when they step up, and they don't necessarily care if they win 100 games or 80 games. As long as they get in the playoffs, they're like, we'll go from there.
it feels like the last week or two of the season, the Phillies, Mets, maybe the Giants. I think a couple of those teams are going to be so far below where the Braves and the Dodgers are, as they run
Mhm.
away and do their thing, that it's going to be a kind of a cluster right there. And I don't think the Phillies separate. I think the Braves and the Dodgers elevate. Excuse me, and I don't think that's like you know, a hot take by any means, but I don't think the
No.
Phillies are the third best team in the National League. I think they're the team that I would put my money on to definitely go under the win total. And then, yeah, let's springboard into the Braves because, I mean, you can argue everything I just said about the Phillies applies to the Braves. They didn't get as close as the Phillies did, but I
Mhm.
mean, how many times are you going to run back the best team and not get it done? I think the difference is I like the rotation more. I think I just like the best players, frankly, more on the Braves than I do on the Phillies. So I don't necessarily mind them running it back. But let me go through the lineup for Atlanta and just talk to me about how great this team is and but who in particular you think could have a better than expected year and maybe who we should stay away from. So Acuna is
Mhm.
going to lead off. I mean, it's really the same team, right?
Yeah.
Albies at second, Riley at third, Olson at first, Ozuna's still there at the DH. Michael Harris, Sean Murphy, who's one of the 5 or 6 best catchers, Arcia at shortstop, and then Kalenic. Did he finish? Was he on the postseason roster last year, Jared Kalenic? Because that was the one name I wasn't 100% sure on.
I'm not sure if he was on their postseason roster. Let me.
But
But
he's
yeah, no.
projected, and they also have D Arnold, the backup catcher who splits time at DH and gets some first base looks. But is that kid Klenek? Is that one of their top prospects? Is he
No,
somebody
so
that
they
they?
actually he was a top prospect man for the Mets, and he was a part of a big trade that came. I actually was part of the Robinson Cano trade, sent him to
Okay.
Seattle, and then he actually I just looked it up. So he actually took off last year a little bit. He was with Seattle, and they just picked him up. He's a great lefty bat. He is still young, never really lived up to his hype, and but he's got potential, especially with the Braves. So many people protecting him in the lineup. That's a guy. Jared Kelenic is probably the guy in that lineup that is low expectations, but could just shatter them.
And then, do they have any prospects that we could see in the next few months?
I don't necessarily think it's going to be something. I think they're kind of set in there. They have what they want to do with the roster. If they bring up guys, I don't think it's necessarily in their plans of, hey, we want them to come in and have to have a meaningful role. It would be
Gotcha.
more just let's see what they can do because they really both of their top 100 prospects in MLB are pitchers that are probably going to get time in the bullpen, I would assume, because we look at their starters and there's not a lot of room there.
So who do you want to, if you're whether for fantasy purposes or I think the most popular bets that people will make for baseball is over under like total bases or home runs, right? That we go, this guy hit a home run. So between Acuna and Riley and Olson, who has the best year? Who would be the one guy where you're like, I mean, I guess the obvious answer is Acuna. Is that where you're leaning?
So I want to lean Acuna, but I kind of feel like just after last year, like it's hard to do that again. And
It's
part
ridiculous.
of me wants to go Austin Riley. I'm a massive Austin Riley fan. Uh, he's just got so much power. I love his swing. It's definitely a dark horse option. I mean, we're not that it's hard, he'd be the best player on literally almost any other team in the league, and he's fourth best on
So
this team.
so things move so fast in life that sometimes we like don't realize like you just have to I just have to read you Acuna's stats because I'm looking at it and I
It's unreal.
don't even 337, 41 homers, 106 RBIs, 149 runs, on base percentage 416, 41% of the time he gets on base, 80 walks to only 84 strikeouts. I mean, what a 73 73 stolen bases. I should have led with 73 stolen bases. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just going in order. I'm like, wait, at 73 stolen bases? Jesus. I mean, he's the best player in baseball, right? Like, it's not even
Yeah.
close.
Yeah. I mean, it's why he won MVP last year. He is one of those guys where in every aspect of the game he can beat you. And except for his fielding when he doesn't care. For some reason, Ronald Acuna, despite having the best arm and range in like the league, just
He
doesn't
gets
care
bored.
sometimes in the outfield, which is always interesting, but that's a whole
Dude,
different story. At the plate, he's the most dynamic weapon in baseball.
unbelievable. So, is there anybody that you're potentially down on the Braves? It's hard to feel that way. I mean, their win total is 101.5 for a reason. Do you
Yeah.
think they get all the way to that, or do you have them closer to 95ish?
I was gonna say, I think it's just hard to for bet a team to win 100. Winning 100 games in the MLB is so hard, and I think they come short. And the reason is with Chris Sale and Charlie Morton, they are expecting those guys to really step up and
That's it.
have these years.
Yeah, so let's thank you for doing that because I meant to go right to the rotation before I asked you on the win total. So that's the plan, right? Spencer Strider and Max Fried is that the best 1-2 punch?
Yeah. Yes.
Especially
Yes.
since it's a righty to a lefty.
Mm-hmm.
That's I love Charlie Morton. How old is he? 53 yet? I mean, my
Yeah,
goodness.
he's got to be. Man, back when he was on the Tampa Bay Rays, how old is he?
39. So I guess he'll be 40 this year at some point, right? So wow.
Yeah.
Charlie Morton, Chris Sale, you mentioned, does he figure it out? I mean, nobody's had, I don't say nobody, but his drop off has been,
Incredible. Yeah. It's
do you think he
he's looked
fixed
good
it?
so far this spring, but I'm not going to put too much into that. Um I really do think that, especially when you're talking about the difference between winning 95 games and winning 102 games, it does come down to how Morton and Sale pitch, because if Sale comes out and he looks even half of what the old Chris Sale looks like, he steps into as their number 3 and that team becomes that much more dangerous. But if he looks like the Chris Sale that we saw in Boston the past few years, where at times it looked more like batting practice than pitching, it's not necessarily going to be a big addition for the team.
And then Ronaldo Lopez has never been a starter. Is that correct?
Yeah, I
Is he
am there.
projected to be their 5th starter, or is there somebody else that I'm missing?
No, it looks like from what I'm seeing as well is Lopez seems to have the 5th spot.
And is that a product of, are they a Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery candidate? Is that partly what you think is going on, or are
I
they
hope
just?
not. I hope not. This team, we can't have any more talent put on this team.
Or what
No, I
about?
think so. One of
I'm
their
sorry, but
top
what?
I was going to say one of their top prospects, AJ Smith-Shawver, I think eventually steps into that 5th spot. I think you were going to see him pitching for them in that 5th spot. But I think Lopez, for the moment, is who they have projected there and could maybe start the season as that guy before they let AJ Smith take over.
So I wanted to ask you about the kid Bryce Elder because he actually was the guy. This is a terrible memory, but last year I went to the Orioles Braves game, and I'm sure you'll remember this one because it was one of the worst losses. Batista struck out the guy, but Adley bobbled the ball right behind, and Hayes got thrown out. Dude, so a quick side note: I went to the game with my brother, and we're sitting in the upper deck until like the 7th inning or so. And if it was just me, for the record, we would have moved in the 2nd inning. But he likes to follow the rules a little bit more. But I'm like, we'll just go down and find better seats. So anyway, by the 7th, 8th inning or whatever it was, accidentally, like without even planning it, get near the Orioles, like where the whatchamacallit, the players' wives and family members are.
Oh yeah,
Who's our third base coach? Do you know?
is it Anthony Sanders? No, Sanders is first.
Son of a gun. It was his wife and kid was right next to us, but right in front of us was Austin Hayes' parents. And I noticed them, thank God, right before he got thrown out at third base because I was devastated. Do you remember that? He like tagged up from second, got thrown out at third base.
Oh, for no reason.
And then Batista strikes out the son of a gun, but Adley like actually played it the right way, but it took a bad bounce. So we lose that game. Anyway, Bryce Elder was the starting pitcher, and he was great that night. His numbers look good, but apparently the spring has been a disaster. He fell off a little bit last year.
Yeah.
Is he just not part of the? I mean, he's only 24 years old, but it looks like he's not going to get an opportunity to start. When last year he's 12-4 with a 3.82 ERA, a 1.28 WHIP. Just kind of fell off at the end. Is there any more you can add to him?
I think he's in the same spot, kind of with Smith Schreiber and Ronaldo Lopez, where they are going to be competing and potentially, I think, I don't want to say they're hoping, but those guys would be the beneficiaries of Chris Sale and Charlie Morton not pitching well. So I think that's kind of where, especially Chris Sale injury wise, is another issue. That he hasn't stayed healthy recently. So I think it's also insurance for a guy like that.
So the Braves, if you had to bet on it, you would say under 100, 1.5.
Yeah, it's hard to win 102 baseball games.
Now the Braves are minus 240 to the win the division. Phillies plus 310. Oh my God, I'm such a schmuck. I literally forgot the Marlins. You know what? That's what happens probably to everybody with the Marlins. That's just not a right thing for me to do. I literally just looked at the odds and were you going to stop me and realize we forgot the Marlins?
Well, if I'm being honest, I thought we were just going to do them next because they're probably just the weirdest team in this division.
I was trying to go in order of projected, and I somehow, what happened was I was excited to talk about the Mets, and then the Buck Showalter thing. I guess I don't know. I don't have a good excuse. So, all right, let's hold up on the whole odds for a second. Let's put a cap on the Braves. You're gonna say at minus 240. So $100 isn't enough to make you really sweat up. I told you I had to bet $1,000 for the season. Would you be willing to lose 2,400 on the Braves to win the division, or would you rather bet that 1,000 on the Marlins, Phillies, or Mets?
I have to go with the Braves. I don't think that the Phillies show up in the regular season. I don't think the Mets have the horses in the rotation to compete with the Braves, and the Marlins are the Marlins. They're just gonna sit around 500. I think.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that would be the advice I would tell people. If you love the Braves, bet $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 on the Braves before the season. Don't try to find that random game when they're minus 280 or they're minus 310 or even if they're minus 185, because they're gonna lose 50 games at least, right? At least 50. Most likely they'll lose 60. And if you love the Braves and you're like, you know what, I think they're going to win the division, just make the one big bet before the season, bet on them to win the National League. But even for the Orioles, it's the same thing because on opening day, I mean, we're going to be minus. You realize we're going to be at minus like 220 or something?
Yeah, it's going to be ridiculous.
Who's the Angels starting pitcher going to be? Do you know?
I don't even think they know. I don't even think they know.
So we're going to be like a minus. It could be like minus 230 by the time everybody finished bets. And it's just not a good habit in baseball at all to bet the money line on these good teams throughout the season. It's just too hard to do it. All right. So it's funny because I was looking at the clock and I was like, I think last time we went a little bit longer. And I was like, man, we must have ripped through it. But it's because I completely forgot the Marlins. It's fucked up. It's just fucked up. No one goes to the Marlins games. Let's just start with the headline, which is when's Alcantara, however you want to say his name, one of the best pitchers in baseball. I assume that part of the reason that the air's let out of the balloon for the Marlins is he's going to start the year on the injured list. Is that correct? Do we know exactly when he's coming back?
So I was looking up his update on what they think, and it's definitely he is going to miss some time. And this Marlins team is going to be hard to project because I could see them selling a lot of their top players.
So let's go through it. They got after Sandy at the head, it's Luzardo will be the opening day starter. I know there were some rumblings that the Orioles were going to trade for him. So I guess we'll start with him and then work our way down. And you're saying that I guess he's the lead candidate if they're not competitive at the All-Star break to be moved. And then talk to me about him and Yuri Perez, Braxton Garrett, Edward Cabrera, and Trevor Rogers, who I'm really liking last year. It looks like that's their projected rotation. So go ahead, floor is yours on the Marlins rotation and which guys you think could be moved here if they're not competitive.
Yeah, also, real quick, I just looked. Alcantara's going to be out for the whole year. I don't know how I just completely missed that, but he will not be pitching this year. So it comes down to Luzardo's their ace. And now, especially if they get rid of him, it's going to be tough because Yuri Perez pitched lights out last year, was one of the best pitchers in the league. And then the Marlins just told him to go to the minors, which was so
right. That was the. Can you elaborate that on a second? Because that was one of the biggest stories last year. That probably, unless you're a gigantic baseball fan, you might not have. So go ahead, tell what happened with him.
Yeah, so extremely young guy and comes up and just outperforms every projection he had, was pitching as one of the best players in baseball over about a 10-start stretch. But sort of like a Tyler Wells, he pitched so well and was eating so many innings that he pitched too well. And he was going too deep into games where suddenly the Marlins looked at it and they're like, he's pitched way more innings than he's supposed to.
But unlike Wells, he never had a couple of bad starts, right? Like they just decided abruptly to be like, all right, based on our analytics, maybe they saw something, but the results were still, he never had poor results. Is that correct?
Yeah, no. Results were there. They just were worried about arm fatigue.
So Braxton Garrett's also a great pitcher. I mean, they have these young guys, but it looks like he's banged up. So what's the analysis on him, Edward Cabrera, and Trevor Rogers to round it out? Because, I mean, they all have great numbers from last year. The Marlins seem to do a pretty good job of developing pitchers.
Very good.
So what about those other three guys, and do you expect them to have good years? I mean, you said they're going to be right around 500. Is there a way where all these pitchers actually outperform the expectations and they can win 85, 90 games?
I think the pitching for sure. You know, Braxton Garrett, he's kind of in a John Means situation where he just is more behind schedule than necessarily dealing with an injury again. So he's going to be back. I think this rotation just has to do what they did last year. They don't necessarily have to overperform. It's going to be the offense that really, this offense has potential, especially after bringing in Tim Anderson. If Tim Anderson returns to what he was at one point,
Are you a Tim Anderson guy? Are you a Tim Anderson guy?
I used to be, and then he got knocked out by Jose Ramirez, and his stats just hit the floor. And I was like, "What is going on, my man?"
Dude, Tim Anderson. So yeah, right. They have Luis Arias. Was he the best? I mean, he was. If he's not the best leadoff hitter, he's what, one of the 2 or 3 best leadoff hitters. He was flirting with 400 for better part of the year last year. And then they got Tim Anderson. They're projected to put him right behind him. Josh Bell, you can do a lot worse than him at the 3 spot. Jake Berger, Jazz Chisholm, Brian De La Cruz, Jesus Sanchez, Avisail Garcia, and Nick Fortes. Go ahead. Where would you like to kind of start with the Marlins lineup?
This I will say I really like this lineup. Luis Arias, I've been a fan of ever since he was with the Twins. He's just such a great, won't hit any doubles, won't hit home runs, but he'll go out there and hit 4 singles for you every game. And he really does it all starts with him. And that's why I love the Tim Anderson signing, because if you have another guy that just consistently, if Tim Anderson can get back to where he's hitting 310, you have a guy, your top 2 guys in the lineup are hitting 350 and 310. That's tough, and that really sets up your big run producers, the Jake Bergers, the Josh Bells, the Brian De La Cruz, to really get those guys in. And then we haven't even talked about Jazz Chisholm, who comes out and he's one of those guys who can be the face of that franchise. He is the electrifying, he's going to go make the big plays, go steal all the bases. And when he's on, he is a, at the time he was one of the better second basemen in baseball. Now he's out in center field, but he still has that ability to make plays.
Are any of those guys potential trade targets?
Yeah, I think if it does not go well, I would not be surprised with the Marlins, especially bringing in a new GM over the offseason. I would not be surprised if some of these guys, especially the guys like Jake Berger, Josh Bell, Tim Anderson, all those guys that are kind of still on those, like, they're not necessarily part of the future plans. They're not, if we want to create a dynasty, they won't be there. Those guys are the guys I could see them moving on from. Same with the Luzardo, same in that boat of, will they want to trade them? No, but if the right offer comes, I think they will.
Do you think that it's an overreaction with it being 78.5 wins to Alacant starting, not being a part of the team? Does that seem like, man, that's a overreaction? Like, if he was starting, if he was there, is he worth 5 wins, 6 wins? What do you think?
He's that good. I think so, especially when you think about if it's him or Trevor Rogers. I think he wins more games than, their 5 guy, because it's not like, you add him in and you have Alcantara, Luzardo, Perez, Edward Cabrera had very good moments last year where it looked like he was really putting it together finally. And so their rotation can be really good. Obviously, Alcantara's not going to be here this year, but they have a very solid 1 through 4.
Do you think that, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but certain teams do a much better job of developing players than other teams? It feels like the Marlins for years have always just produced, whether or not they stay with the team. But what do you think? Is it? Do you think the Marlins rank? I guess maybe what I would like to ask is, whether it's random bullpen guys or guys that, halfway through the year are like, hey, I haven't really heard of that guy and he's solid. Do you expect the Marlins to make the right decision? Whereas maybe other friends, you're like, I don't necessarily know what they're doing.
I can't trust the Marlins. They're one of those teams that I don't trust.
What would be the reason to not trust them? Do they seem to? Has there been a couple moves they've made? Like, I guess over the past 5 or 6 years, and I think one of the things I like to look at is, hey, how right were you about this prospect? Did you trade him or did you acquire him? Are the Marlins usually on the right side of trades, or it seems like they're on the wrong side of it?
Well, I think the biggest reason I don't trust them right now is because their GM, Kim Ng, former GM, comes in and is known as this she is coming in to build a star-studded team. She's going to build this dynasty, and she's a big analytics person. She's going to build in all these different analytics departments and take them to another level. And she started doing that, and they took those massive steps. She acquired Luis Arias, and then he flirts with 400 for most of the year. She's getting the most out of all these players. And then they asked her to kind of take a step down a bit and they could have someone else come in and work with her. And she said no. She was like, I'm going to go elsewhere now. And they mutually parted ways. And that's something that really did not sit well with me early in the offseason. I don't even think I don't believe she's anywhere right now.
Was she the only female making personnel decisions?
Yes.
I did not know that. How long did she have that position?
I believe it was 2 years, 3 years. But she
had the final say on personnel for the Marlins. And then they decided in this offseason, we lost our best pitcher to injury, and she's not willing to work with others, so we're going to get rid of her.
Yeah, it came out of nowhere. No one really saw it coming. Actually, people were extremely shocked. And then I believe teams made offers to her, but she is looking for the right situation. She didn't want to rush into anything. I think the Red Sox had talked to her, and she didn't want to deal with that.
You know what? We're gonna do more. I'm gonna do my own research on her, so we can talk about that more next week because I think that's interesting. Those are kinds of the stories. That's what I'm looking for. I like to talk about things that are thought provoking that might not necessarily be headlines or something that Stephen A. Smith might have said, but are a lot more interesting to dive into. And I didn't even know that. So, all right,
Yeah,
let's.
actually, quick story. I worked with a few years ago someone who was a scout with her back in the 90s, and like it was both of their first jobs. And he said to me, he was like, the day I met her, I knew she was going to be the first female GM in the Major League Baseball. He was like, everyone in the room was like, yeah, this is the smartest person here. And he
Wow,
even
that's
said, he
really
was
cool.
like, he said it took too long. He thought she was going to get it before like 2010. They were like, everyone in that room thought she was going to just fly through and like own the team by 2010.
Wow. All right. Well, good. I got some homework to do. Let's finish up here with the National League. Kind of put things into perspective since we did all three of the divisions. And we'll recap it by me putting you on the spot here and just saying kind of like some either or questions with
Mm-hmm.
gambling being involved is that is the premise for everything that we're doing here. So you got $1,000. You got to bet it. The Dodgers are plus 175. These are the odds I'm looking at right now on DraftKings. I just remind people like whatever bet you decide to make, shop it around, especially if you live in Maryland. You just, I don't know how many different sites you can use now, but there's a ton of them. And the odds will fluctuate based on, if DraftKings is getting more money on the Dodgers, then the odds
Mm-hmm.
are going to resemble that. And if FanDuel is getting more on the Dodgers, it'll resemble that. So shop it around. But for purposes of this conversation, looking at DraftKings odds, so you got $1,000. Dodgers are plus 175. Braves are plus 250. Where are you putting them running?
Braves. I can't trust the Dodgers.
So after the Braves, the Phillies have the next best odds at 8-1. Cubs are at 14-1. Cardinals 16. Diamondbacks 18, and then it just keeps on going up. You got another $1,000. You got to pick somebody besides the Dodgers or Braves. What odds do you like to win the National League?
I think you got to take the Phillies. Obviously both teams in the NL East, but just the way they're playoff performers.
To make the playoffs, these are probably my favorite bets.
Mm.
Diamondbacks are even. I'm just going to go right through them. Diamondbacks are even money, pretty much. You think they make the playoffs?
Ooh. This is one of those, is it the World Series hangover? Like you got there, you couldn't complete it, or do they? I'll say, yeah. I'll say it's a young enough group where I think it's motivation for them, even though they overperformed, like they want to get back.
So if you have the Diamondbacks in, so we have you have the Dodgers winning the West.
Yeah.
You got the Braves winning the East. I should have led with the Central. I believe you like the Cubs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you got the Cubs in the Central. So now you got three wild cards. You got the Diamondbacks in there. Are you letting the Giants or Padres? You got the Phillies.
Yeah. And then I got to go with Padres. I think it's this year or never. That's how I'm putting it for the Padres. If they don't do it this year, they have to blow everything up.
So if you had to bet $1,000 on the Padres at plus 215,
Mm-hmm.
or the Pirates at 5.5
Pirates.
to 1.
I was just gonna say I almost took out the Diamondbacks when I realized I had one spot left. I was like, shit, I might put the Pirates over the
So
Diamondbacks.
5.5 to 1. All right, so with the Pirates, would you rather bet 5.5 to 1 that they make the playoffs, or would you rather bet 16 to 1 that they win the division?
I'm gonna have to make the playoffs. I have considered. I think we talked about this. I've looked at that 16 to 1 a few times for the Pirates, just because I don't trust anyone in that division, but I also don't know if I trust the Pirates.
Is it because you like but how high are you on the Cubs? Because you said you think the Phillies have the third best. It sounds like to me you don't really think the Cubs can win the National League. You just think they win the NL Central.
Yeah, I think they just have the best team of the NL Central. But I think the Pirates could be a sneaky, fun team that has a lot of young guys that can make some noise and maybe sneak in that third wild card spot.
Okay. How about this? This would be a great bet. If you can hit this, you can bet first and second. Okay, so for any division, you can predict who's going to be in first and second place, and then in the order, and then first, second, and third. If there's one division where you're like, you know what, I know exactly how this division's going to play out in the National League, whether it's the Braves, Cubs, Dodgers, and then on the way down, what's one division where you're like, you know what, I'm pretty sure it's going to be 1, 2, 3 this way.
I think the West is going to be Dodgers, Giants, Padres.
You mean Diamondbacks?
Oh, do you see? This is why it keeps.
You have the you can't have the.
Yeah, now this is why I want to put the Diamondbacks in just because they're a young, fun team. But now that I'm looking at it, they don't. No, I can't have them in there.
So now that we're first, so that's why we have to talk things out, because you know what? Not every Zach is the perfect person that you have to pin him down, because if Zach's like the guy. I hope I'm not starting to fight with you, but Zach's the guy who has like 14 people in his top 10. Because he's like, well, this guy. It's like, no, I told you had to pick 10 guys. You're like, well,
I forgot the Diamondbacks were out there too. Shit, yeah.
So you have, if you want the Giants, all right. Let's stop you for a second. You got the Braves. This is why I don't like the Phillies, by the way. Maybe I can get you off the Phillies as we're talking this. So you have the Braves. If you still have the Phillies, and you still have the Cubs, and you still have the Dodgers, you can get 2 from the West. But you can't have 3. So you can have the Diamondbacks, Padres, and Giants. You can have 2 of them. Are you pushing out the Giants? Are you pushing out the Diamondbacks now?
Yeah, I just completely forgot the Giants existed out there.
So you like the Giants actually more than you like the Padres?
Or more than I like the. Yeah, I just think that the Padres are in they're just such a shit show at times where I can't trust them to win over 90 games, but I can trust them to maybe sneak into that third playoff spot.
It's just so I'm putting you on the spot. You got Dodgers 1, Giants 2, and then what you're really torn about is Diamondbacks, Padres.
Yeah, because it's like, do you take the expectations or do you take the young, fun team that's coming off the World Series overachieving?
So are you higher on the Giants in particular because they signed Chapman after we did the preview? Is that what put it over the top for you?
Yeah, I will say that I'd really like. They just seem like they've gotten, and then obviously right before the preview they get Jorge Soler. I like more and more how their lineup is starting to pan out.
Got it. So pin you down. We got Dodgers win the West, Cubs win the Central, Braves win the East, and then you got the Phillies, and you got the Giants as a clear 4 and 5, and then you would say the Padres is the 6th. But you also are relatively high on the Pirates and the teams that you would bet against in the National League, where you're like, you know what, I just don't see it. I think you had the under with the Mets. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What about where'd you land with the Reds and the Cardinals? Obviously, you don't have them making the playoffs. Do you think it's a dumpster fire one way or the other? I mean, the Reds, a lot of guys think the Reds are a team that can win 90, 95 games this year. You just don't see it.
I just don't. I think that they could, they're like the Orioles last year, in where I think they either take a massive step forward or a slight step backwards. And I think I'm leaning more towards they take that slight step back before they take the jump.
Well, there you go. I don't know exactly how much National League Baseball we'll cover each and every Friday that we're hanging out, but I'm glad that you did that. I know I personally, like, I will make a ton of preseason baseball bets. Like, I just think it's really difficult to bet regular season baseball unless you're religiously watching it. I mean, you tweet out all the time, and I forgot who was the last guy you tweeted out about, but it was like that 0 for 4. What was it? Like, somebody went 0 for 4, but if you like watched his actual at bats, so it's really hard to just look at the analytics of any sport for gambling purposes and be like, I can predict what's going to happen the next game if you don't actually watch the game. So for me, I'd rather do all my research before the season starts. Plus, I think you get way better odds. I know you get better odds before the season starts. It's on a day-to-day basis. Trying to figure out how to beat Vegas is not a recipe for success for most people. If you can figure it out, fucking email me and let me know. Like honestly, I've been doing this with Jeremy now for almost a year. I've been in this industry for the better part of 15 years. If somebody wins 60% of the games over a course of a month, that's like grounds for a party. Like, so when I see people be like, "Oh, I'm 9-0 in my last 9," or "I'm 25-3," it's like it's all just bullshit. It's really hard to bet. So if you're trying to make money doing this, I really think you want to bet before the season starts and try to find the edge that way. So I appreciate you doing this. Next week we'll do the American League will be more fun. It'll be more relative to the Orioles. So we'll start out west. I don't think we'll have. I mean, the American League West. The American League is. Is it fair to say it's better teams in the American League than the National League? Much deeper? Do you feel that way?
Yeah. Oh, it's much deeper. The National League, I think, is very top heavy.
Yeah. So, all right, we'll do the American League West next week. Anything else on your mind before we get out of here?
No, just excited it's the weekend and ready to talk more baseball next week.
Yeah, give me somebody else, whether it's Orioles related or I like that. I feel like I'm buying low by hanging out with you now before you become super famous. So anybody you recommend now, they can like I don't know how exactly social media works, but like 3 years from now, it could be like, hey, Zach mentioned me. Now Zach.
Yeah, exactly. My man at EDC Burner, T Fields, is one of my favorite graphic guys. He makes a bunch of graphics, mostly Ravens, also a big Orioles guy, but he's someone that while I was kind of getting bigger, I've looked up to over the past few years and his photoshops and everything.
Sweet. Yeah, I think I said it the other day on social media. I was hopefully with new ownership for next year because there's so many. I don't know if I assume most teams, like if I went on the Twitter, they would have just as many like diehard fans as we do. But God, we have so much great content that it'd be nice during spring training to highlight some of the things that people are doing, give people a chance to broadcast the games because there's so much interest. I would love to just hear the chatter that goes on with these guys. But like anytime Orioles social media releases something, it's like it's just perfect. So all right, I'll let you get out of here. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week for some AL West baseball.
All right, thanks, Zach. Have a good weekend, man.
Have a good one.
See ya.